At around 4 this afternoon, Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, no overnight bag, just a bottle of water in his hand, was escorted by police officers with body cameras on their jacket pockets out of his North London home. He was taken away for questioning at a London police station. It comes just over a fortnight after members of the Metropolitan Police Specialist Crime Team searched this home and his other home in Wiltshire. Unlike Andrew Mountbatten Windsor last Thursday, they did that without an arrest warrant. Now Lord Mandelson finds himself in a similar position to Andrew, in a police custody suite, perhaps still waiting for his lawyer to turn up, potentially giving fingerprints, DNA sample, potentially waiting in a cell. Until just over 5 months ago, Peter Mandelson was representing Britain abroad in the most important foreign posting imaginable. He was sacked from the Washington job because of his links to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But then, at the beginning of this month, when the US Department of Justice released thousands of emails, Peter Mandelson became of interest to the police. The emails suggested that in his time as a cabinet minister, he may have regularly passed on market-sensitive government material to Jeffrey Epstein. The Met said Lord Mandelson was being investigated on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This afternoon, the government said it would soon be releasing some of Peter Mandelson's correspondence with government from his time as ambassador, which MPs forced the government to publish. But it wouldn't include the questions posed to Lord Mandelson or his answers when Number 10 checked out his Epstein connections.
The government expects to be able to publish the first tranche of documents very shortly in early March. I should, however, inform the House that it remains the case that a subset of this first tranche of documents is currently subject to the ongoing Metropolitan Police investigation. This includes correspondence between Number 10 and Lord Peter Mandelson, in which a number of follow-up questions were asked.
The same government minister earlier revealed that a junior minister, Josh Simons, like Lord Mandelson, a figure on the right of the party, was being investigated by the Prime Minister's independent advisor on ministerial standards over suggestions that he'd falsely accused journalists looking into his old think tank of pro-Russian links.
Instead of an investigation into one single individual, can there be an investigation into the entire operations of Labour together? Nobody knows who they are, and we need to find out.
The left believes Labour together plotted Jeremy Corbyn's downfall, and they turned out in strength to condemn it. When emails first came to light, Lord Mandelson denied criminal wrongdoing. A continuing police investigation on top of government releases of his communications promised to keep this saga in the headlines, only adding to Keir Starmer's anguish. There had been some relief amongst people very close to Lord Mandelson that just maybe the fact that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested and he, Peter Mandelson, hadn't been, might mean that this might not happen or things might not happen in this very public way. But that has now happened today, and the searches have resumed, we understand, at Peter Mandelson's properties, those searches that actually we thought had completed about a couple of weeks ago. This offence is notoriously difficult to pursue in the courts, misconduct in a public place and public office, and it could be that this is a very protracted business. And all of this, of course, plays into the politics. You've been talking about what a monumental figure Peter Mandelson was in the Labour family, but it plays into politics in a very general way as well, in terms of the optics of a senior figure at a time when trust in politicians is so low. A senior figure in the political world being dragged, his name dragged through this sort of scene, as you can see on our screens tonight, with police officers taking him down the station for questioning, but also in terms of the Labour Party. Where does it go next after Keir Starmer, if it dislodges Keir Starmer? You sense the left of the party gleefully dancing around these issues, the Peter Mandelson one and the Labour Together issue that I mentioned there, and trying to capitalise on it, make sure that, to paraphrase an old phrase that Gordon Brown once used when David Miliband was trying to take over, and he said, no time for an apprentice. You can hear the left saying, if Keir Starmer were to go, no time for a Blairite.
Gary Gibbon, in Westminster. Well, joining me now is Wendy Joseph KC, who's a former criminal judge at the Old Bailey. Can you tell me what is misconduct in public office?
Well, it's a tricky one to prove. The problem is it's not a statutory offence. It's a common law offence. So we can't go to a statute and have a look and see exactly what it consists of. All we can do is go to the old case law and have a look at what now the law says has come out of that. So, in essence, in order to be guilty of this offence, first of all, the defendant's got to be a public officer. No problem there with Mandelson, I think, check. Secondly, while he was acting as a public officer, he must have misconducted himself. It must have been a deliberate act, and it must have been something he knew was wrong or was recklessly indifferent about whether it was wrong or not. So that's quite a lot to prove already. Then in addition to that, you've got to prove that the degree of wrongdoing was such that there was an abuse of the public trust in him and that he had no reasonable excuse or justification. So quite a package for them to prove.
Yes, a long way to go. You also wonder with both Mandelson and Andrew Windsor, given there has been so much in the public domain about both these individuals and so much of the possible evidence published, how is it possible to have a fair trial?
Well, it's a reasonable question to ask, but all the time at the Central Criminal Court and in many other courts, we try big cases which have had a lot of publicity and in which the public have been deeply interested and sometimes deeply upset. You've only got to think of some of the big cases we've had recently where children have been killed and youngsters have been slaughtered and so forth. And judges do manage this because jurors are given very strict instructions about the need to concentrate on what they hear in court. And once you get into a trial, jurors really are able, I think, to concentrate on what is put before them, the evidence and the arguments. But I do accept in this case it's a big ask.
Wendy Joseph, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, we can now talk to the Labour MP, Belle Ribeiro Addy, who joins us from Westminster. Can you hear me all right, Belle?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, how damaging for the Labour Party, the government, and more broadly British politics is it to have a figure the size of Lord Mandelson arrested?
I think it's hugely damaging, but I definitely believe that we knew this a few weeks ago when all of these issues were raised. I think what we need to get to a point of now is trying to ensure the maximum level of accountability. That is the only thing I think the British public are going to accept now. When we think about the different institutions that have been involved, the different individuals, and actually, do you know, I think there should be a wide-ranging investigation into all of these things, how power is being abused, and I don't think any institution, be it the monarchy, a political party or anything like that, should be exempt from such an investigation, because as I said, the major issue has been the damage of trust between us and the British public, and they need to feel that something's being done about it.
Well, what do you mean a major investigation? You mean a public inquiry? Into what?
A public inquiry, whatever is required. I mean, what we've seen, without going into details, obviously because we're not technically meant to, is how individuals have used their office and effectively abused their power to go about these behaviours that are effectively criminal. So the idea that anybody in any high office or any institution should shield you from, you know, living by the laws of the land absolutely shouldn't be the case. And I don't think that's what is expected at all. And I think there needs to be a lot looked at in terms of how people are allowed to do these things. I mean, you know, are they shielded by security services, X, Y, and Z, all of these different things that people are now thinking, oh my gosh, how is it that people who are meant to be on the highest level of scrutiny are using their power effectively to commit crimes?
You're perceived to be on the left. Are some on your side making political capital of this with Keir Starmer?
Do you know what? I'll be completely honest. I think it damages politicians overall, from the right to the left. Yes, we can absolutely say that there were issues of poor judgment in certain cases, and there've been a lot of issues raised generally about who made appointments, and some people have lost their jobs essentially. But the reality is that the British public are looking at what's happening in politics, and they're not necessarily differentiating between any of us. We are all being tarred with the same brush.
Now, we also saw in Gary's report this sort of investigation now into the activities of the Labour Together think tank and the involvement of the Cabinet Office Minister Josh Simons. Now, you signed a letter from some MPs calling for a wider investigation. What do you want?
Well, again, just like I've said before, I want the truth. I want to understand what people in positions of power were using this power to do, particularly when I think, of the manner in which they were looking into journalists and things like that, something which is not expected of our politicians. All of these things have to come out, and actually measures have to be put in place to make sure that things like this don't happen again. So I was pleased to sign that letter, and again, I hope to see some sort of investigation carried out, because if it is just swept under the carpet, it's nothing's going to change.
But again, some people say your side are just using this to kick the right of the party.
No,
is the curiosity entirely honourable?
Well, like I said, I don't believe that it's just about one side of the party or even one party in politics. I think this damages us all, and ultimately, when I'm thinking about what the individuals in Labour Together are accused of doing, it's fundamentally wrong. I mean, why would that sort of issue not warrant some sort of investigation? The idea that some people are more unhappy about it than others doesn't mean that it's not fundamentally wrong. And absolutely, it should be investigated. I just don't accept that it's one side of the party kicking the other, because who does that? Quite frankly, who goes about investigating journalists? As a journalist yourself, I'm sure it's something that you find abhorrent.
I'll leave that as a rhetorical question. Bel Ribeiro-Addy, thank you very much indeed. Now, Australia's Prime Minister has written to Sir Keir Starmer saying he would back any proposal to remove Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor from the line of succession. Despite losing his titles, Andrew is still 8th in line to the throne. The government is considering introducing an Act of Parliament to prevent him ever becoming king, which must be supported by all 14 Commonwealth countries.